Lovelies, welcome to the second part of learning to make a corporate turtleneck pencil dress with sweetheart yoke and structured design around the sleeve. So the first part of this video is the one right before this on the channel, and it contains the pattern drafting and cutting tutorial, while here I'm going to be showing you how I sewed everything together. So please do well to watch this video to the end, like this video, share and subscribe to my channel while we get started. So I have all my pieces cut out for the front and the back. I used the pattern I drafted out to cut out the pieces of fabric. Please do well to make reference to the first part of this video. I'm going to drop the link in the comments so that you can check it out and follow up from here. So I had just shown the front pieces, the top and the skirt, and here are the back pieces. I have two separate pieces for the top back and also two separate pieces for the skirt. Now I'm just going to place this aside so that I can start sewing. I'll bring in the top pieces first, and I'm just going to open up the yoke and open up the main fabric for the top front. I'll attach the yoke to the top front by placing them right sides together and sewing from one end of the sweetheart design to the other end, just like this. So this is it here after I was done sewing. Now it's time to attach the lining piece. I'll just sew the lining on the joining of the yoke and the main top piece. I'm just going to place it this way and sew it from one end to the other end, and this is it after I was done. Sorry, it's a bit too fast at this point. So it's time for me to sew my side dart. You know, on the paper when I drafted it out, I included side darts to this, and I said I was going to sew it on the fabric. I'm just measuring the shoulder to the bust point so that I can have a clearer landmark to sew the side dart. Now I'm folding it into two so that I can easily get the midpoint of the top. Now from the midpoint, I'll mark the bust span measurement divided by 2, and I'll mark down 2 inches from the side for the side dart measurement, and I'm just going to slant it this way, connecting the 2 points together. I'll make sure the lining and the main fabric are aligned properly. I'll go ahead and notch those 2 points. So this is going to be easy for me to sew it because I'm going to be sewing the darts on the main fabric and on the lining separately. So I'm going to sew it on the wrong side, and this is it here after I was done sewing it. As you can see, I sewed it on the wrong side and I also sewed it on the lining piece separately. Now it is time to attach the top to the skirt part, and to do that I'll place the top right sides facing with the skirt, and I'll just make a straight stitch along the waistline. Now this is it after joining the top and the skirt for the front, and now it's time to work on the back pieces. I'll just place the top back pieces on the skirt pieces right sides together, and I'll make straight stitches along the waistline. So I'm not sewing any darts on this dress because I already closed them on the paper except for the side dart. And after joining the top with the skirt pieces for the back, I'm going to attach the front to the back on the sides. So I'm just going to place them together this way. I'll make sure that the side joinings are aligning, and then I'm also going to make sure that the shoulders are aligned properly. I'll first of all sew the shoulders with about 1/2 inch at the top. I'll join the shoulders together and I'll go on to shape up the sides. So the initial sewing allowance I added on paper when I was drafting this pattern out was 1.25 inches, but this fabric is stretchy, so I'm going to take off an extra 0.25 inches from the sides. So instead of shaping it up with 1.25 inches, I'm going to shape it up with 1.5 inches. I really hope you understand. I'm basically just trying to make the dress more body hugging, if that makes sense. So I'm going to sew the sides and also sew the shoulders, and this is it here after I was done sewing the shoulders together and the sides as well. And I'll proceed to attach the zipper from the neck downwards to the hip line. So I'm just going to stop where the hip line is, and I'll go on to close the rest of the center back and just leave a little allowance for slit. And this is what the dress looks like after fixing the zipper and closing the other end. I'll turn it over to the front so that I can start working on the turtleneck. Now I'm bringing in a plain piece of paper. I'll draw a straight line on the paper and go on to divide that line into 2. You can divide it into 2 equal parts, but I'm just marking what I feel is the midpoint of the line. After marking the midpoint, I'll label one side of the line front and the other side back. Now I'm going to start with the front part of the line first. I'll bring in the dress and I'll fold it into 2 this way. I'll fold the front part into 2 so that I can get the midpoint of the front neckline. And then from that midpoint, I'll just measure to the side. That's to where I have the shoulders meeting, the shoulder joining. And what I have there is 4.5 inches. And now I'm going to mark that 4.5 inches on the front part of this line. So placing the 4.5 inches on the midpoint of the line, I'll mark it outwards. And I'm also going to measure from the midpoint of the back to the shoulder joining as well, and what I have there is 4 inches. So I'm going to place the tape on the back part of the line, and I'm going to mark 4 inches right there. Now, and after doing that, I'll come back to the front part of the line and I'll go upwards from the mid front by half an inch. So I'll just mark half an inch upwards and I'll slant it with my curve ruler to the midpoint of the line. Please just pay attention to what I'm doing. Now I've made that little curve, I'm going to mark the length of the turtleneck, and what I'm using is 1.5 inches. So I'll go upwards from the mid front, the center and the back by 1.5 inches, and then at the back I'm going to draw the line straight upwards this way, and in front I'm going to further go inwards by 0.25 inches. So the front is a bit more slanted while the back is straighter. Now after going inwards, I'm just going to slant it downwards, and the length is still 1.5 inches. Now I'm going to connect all the 3 points together. So I'll first of all connect from the back to the midpoint with my straight ruler, and then from the front to the midpoint of the line I'm going to use the same curve I used at the lower part of the line, just a very slight curve. Now that I've done that, I'm just marking some arrows at the top so that I know which part is upwards and which part is the center front. Although the center front is easier to identify because of the slight curve it has. Now I'll just proceed to cut everything out. Now this here is the pattern for my turtleneck. I'll bring in the fabric, I'll place it on a fold, and I'll make sure to place the mid front of the turtleneck pattern on the folded edge of the fabric. I'll use my pin to just hold it down in place, and I'll add 0.5 inches of allowance all around the turtleneck pattern. Then I'll go ahead and cut it out. Now that I've cut that out, I'll place my fabric on a fold again so that I can cut out a second piece. So this second piece is going to be for the lining. Now I have the main piece and the lining piece ready, I'll just notch the midpoint of the lower part so I know the side I'm going to be attaching to the dress. So I'll open this up and I'll go on to iron hairstay on the wrong sides of these pieces, both the lining and the main pieces. Now this is what I have after ironing the hairstay on it. I'll place the lining on the main fabric, right sides together this way, and I'll sew along the top with a straight stitch, and I'll also sew the sides. I'll leave the lower part here open, the part I'm attaching to the dress. So this is it after sewing it. I'm just going to notch the edges and make some notches all over so that it will be easy for me to turn over to the right side. Now I've turned it over to the right side, I'll go on and give it a very good press, and I also ironed in the ½ inch of allowance I added when I was cutting it out on the fabric. So I still have my 1.5 inches for the turtleneck. Now to attach the turtleneck to the dress, I'm going to place the right side of the turtleneck with the wrong side of the dress around the neckline. I'm going to pin from one zipper allowance opening all around the shoulders, going through the front neckline, the other shoulders, and back to the other zipper allowance opening, and I'm just going to make a straight stitch. So this is it here after I had sewn it, the right side to the wrong side, and it's going to give it a clean finish when I turn it over. And now to finish up with attaching the turtleneck to the dress, I'm going to place the wrong side of the turtleneck this time on the right side of the dress. So I'll make sure I have the 0.5 inches allowance inside, and I'm going to make a top stitch along the line right there. And this is it after I was done making the top stitch. I made sure that my zipper was fully enclosed inside the turtleneck. So now it's time to cut out the sleeve. I'll place a piece of fabric on a fold, and I'll make sure that the fold can take the armhole measurement divided by 2. So the armhole measurement is 17 divided by 2 is 8.5. So if I measure the fabric on a fold, I'll make sure I have at least 8.5 inches with maybe 1 inch or 1.5 inches for allowance, and I have that here. So from the top of the folded fabric, I'll come down by ½ an inch, which is going to serve as the starting line, and from that starting line I'll mark down the shoulder to the biceps point, which is the cap's height of 4.5 inches. So I'm just going to mark that there and draw a straight line across. So still from the starting line, I'm going to mark down the shoulder to the elbow, which is 13 inches, and then the shoulder to the full length, that's the shoulder to the wrist, which is 25 inches. I'll draw a straight line along the elbow point I just marked and also along the wrist, and then I'll go on to add 1 inch of allowance below the wrist. Please pardon the color of my chalk, I didn't have a more contrasting color. Now on the lines I've drawn out, I have the starting line, the biceps line, the elbow line, the wrist line, and 1 inch of allowance. Now moving back to the biceps line, I'm going to mark the biceps circumference measurement divided by 2. So the biceps circumference circumference is 13 inches. 13 divided by 2 is 6.5. I'll mark it there, and I'm going to add 1.5 inches for sewing allowance. Now I'm going to measure the entire distance I have there, including the allowance, and I'll mark the midpoint of that line, and I'm going to measure upwards to the starting line, and I'll mark the midpoint. I'm marking the midpoint from the starting line to the biceps line. So this midpoint I just marked is going to serve as a landmark for me to draw out my armhole curve. So bringing in my curve ruler and placing it on the starting line, I'm just going to curve from the folded edge to the midpoint, and I'll turn the ruler over this way, and I'll continue the curve from that midpoint into the sewing allowance. Now I'm going to confirm the armhole measurement of 8.5 inches on this armhole line I have just drawn out. Now when I confirm that, I have 8.5 inches and I have at least 1 inch for allowance, for sewing allowance. Now I'm going to go over to the elbow, and I'll mark the elbow circumference divided by 2. I'll add 1.5 inches for sewing allowance, and on the wrist as well, I'll mark the wrist circumference divided by 2, and I'm going to add 1.5 inches for sewing allowance. Now I'll use my straight ruler to just connect all the points from the armhole down to the wrist, and I'll proceed to just cut it out. After cutting, I'll just notch the midpoint of the sleeve, and I'll place another fabric on a fold so that I can cut out the second sleeve. Now I have the two sleeves cut out, I'll place them right sides together and sew from the armhole all the way to the wrist before I attach it to the dress. After sewing that, I went on to also hem the lower part of the sleeve, that is around the wrist, and now it's time to attach the sleeve to the dress. So I'm attaching the armhole of the sleeve to the armhole of the dress. So I've just attached one side for now so that I can go on to show you how I made the structured design that goes around the sleeve. I'll be using this black crepe fabric, and I've placed it on a fold because I'll be cutting out 2 at once. So the length of this design is 4.5 inches. That is going to be the final length when I am done pleating it. So I know it looks longer now. By the time I'm done making small pleats, it's going to shorten to 4.5 inches. So right now, the length I have here is 11 inches on a fold because I'm cutting out the 2 parts together. So I'm using a length of 11 inches including the allowance. And now for the width, that is from the front armhole to the back armhole, the design going round is going to be 23 inches. So I'm going to add about 2 inches for allowance. So in total, everything is going to be 25 inches. That is for the width or the circumference of this design. Now I'm going to mark 25 inches at that point, and I'll just go on to cut it out. After cutting that out, I'm just going to slash the midpoint of this fold so that I can separate the right side from the left side. Now, in order to give this fabric some strength, I'm going to be ironing paper stay to the wrong side of this fabric. This is going to make the fabric a bit more firm and have some structure. But then after ironing the paper stay on the fabric, the wrong side of the fabric is going to be white because of the paper stay. So I have to cut out lining pieces to line the main fabric I've cut out for the design. Now I'm going to place another piece of fabric on a fold again, and this time I'm going to cut out the lining piece with the actual length of the design, the final length I want it to be, which is 4.5 inches. I'll just add 1 inch for sewing allowance to turn it over to the right side, and I'm using the same width of 25 inches. So I've marked 25 inches in width, but with 5 inches in length, 5.5 inches in length actually. Now after cutting that, I'm going to just divide it at the midpoint of the fold, and here I have ironed the paper stay on the main fabric, and it's time to make the pleats. And from the edge of the fabric, I'm going to make some mini pleats, about 4 or 5 pleats in total. So I'm just going to pick a tiny piece of the fabric and just fold it, and I will try to confirm with my tape if I have got up to 5.5 inches. That is including the allowance I need to turn it over with the lining. So I'm just going to make mini pleats on the side. I'll use my pins to just hold it in place for now before I go on to iron it. I'll just pick some mini pleats, fold it over, use my pins to secure it for now, and then I'll confirm with my tape if I have gotten up to 5.5 inches in total. Now finally checking here, I've been able to pleat to 5.5 inches. I'm going to do the same thing on this other side of the fabric. So I'm just going to try to pleat in the same manner so that when I iron it, it's going to be straight. Now that I'm done making the pleats on both edges of the fabric, I'm going to just fold the middle as well and give it a really good press, and this is what I have. Now I'll turn it over to the wrong side so we can see. As you can see, the back is not really as even as the front, and I'm going to take off the pins, and then on the wrong side I'll go on and make a straight stitch along the lines that my iron has made. So I'm just going to sew it down there so that I can sort of secure the pleats in place. So this is it after I sewed everything down, all the lines I had pleated, and I'm going to bring the lining I cut out and place it right sides with the main design, and I'm going to sew the top and the lower part. I'm not going to sew the edges of 4.5 inches. I'll just leave that open so I can use it to turn it over to the right side. So this is what I mean. I made straight stitches at the top and at the lower part. Now I'm going to just notch those areas because this fabric is really thick now because of the paper stay. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the right side and give it a really good press again. Now I'm done ironing, I'm just going to do the exact same thing to this other fabric, and this is what I have. I have the two designs ready to attach to the dress. Now I'm going to be attaching the design to the midpoint of the front armhole and the midpoint of the back armhole. So it's just going to be going over the sleeve, over the arm, just like this. And now I'm going to go ahead and loosen up this sleeve that I have attached just around the midpoint of the armhole, and then I'm going to insert the design into that point, and I'll sew it on the inside with a straight stitch. And now the other edge of the design is going to go to the midpoint of the back armhole, so I'm going to insert it through there and sew it on the inside with a straight stitch as well. And I'll do the exact same thing to this other sleeve. I'll attach the sleeve first before I go on to insert the design. It was just easier for me that way. Now this is the dress after I was done with everything. I used hemming gum to finish up the ends of the dress, and for the center back of the turtleneck area I attached hook to that point. Thank you so much for staying up to this point. This is how the dress looks on my client. I really love the outcome of this dress. Please do well to give this video a thumbs up. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments. I'll be happy to respond. Also share this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't. I'll see you next time. Bye.